What is happening, guys? Welcome back to Redbeard's Garage, and today we're going to be doing the A-arms on the Yamaha Yerf Dog, or the Yama Dog. So Centurial donated us a YZ or YZ450 race bike that he had, one of the owners had previously raced. So that was the inspiration for this. We wanted to start with a cheap chassis, even though we replaced 89% of it because I didn't like the thin wall tube. So we used 1 1/4 11 gauge tubing throughout on everything we added. You saw us in the last video, we made the spindles from scratch, and I showed you guys the whole process of that. Now I'm going to show the whole process of building A-arms. These are a little bit different because the upper A-arm that I'm running with is going to be real close together pattern. So it's going to be like an arm instead of like a pattern. And that's not going to be an issue because your lower A-arm, if that's where your shock is mounted to, is taking the bulk of the hit. So your upper one's more of a guide arm. So I got my heim joints. You saw us also make all these tabs. I still have to tack on the tabs on the passenger side of the buggy. But we got all of our tabs, and if you walk over here, you can see that I got 2 heim joints mounted side by side. And that's how we're going to do this double arm that bends in and meets a piece of tube, like a stub that I'm going to put on this heim joint. Went ahead and made a stub for the lower one. This is just 1 1/4 tubing. I put it on my lathe and opened it up just a hair, like a few thousandths, to fit over these real nice. And then I keep my hole saw cutouts for things like this. So I was able to cap that off, and later I will MIG weld that up so it doesn't have that hole in it. So we have a little stub. And I went ahead and made 2 of these, 1 for each side. Now how I always do A-arms is I build one side just on the jig table like this. These tables are freaking amazing because the fact that I can have my spindle set perfectly in space exactly where I want it, and we know everything on this table is true and square as long as I got my table true and square, which we do. We also measured from the center line of the buggy out to the outside of the wheel hub on the rear to check what that wheel spacing was because we wanted to match on the front. We want our tires to match the same. We're using the same offset on front and rear, so we measured from the center of the buggy and we placed this in space. We got a level on it, so we're nice and dead flat. So now all we gotta do is come up with this A-arm, then we'll do the upper last. The shock will be in front out here and come up, and we'll probably have to do some shock towers. Not ideal, but that's the way it's gonna be. We're not running really expensive components on this either. We want it to be something that you guys could replicate, so our shocks are gonna be Go Power Sports go-kart shocks. She'll give us plenty of travel, and they're decent quality. I've never actually blown one, and we've ran them pretty hard, so that's what we're going to use on this. So we're not going to get crazy travel, but we're going to have portability and a good ride. One other thing is different than my other chassis is when the suspension is flat, the A-arms are dead flat. That's normally around about half of my suspension travel. It's not going to be the case on this one because of how close this frame rail is. If I was to go, you know, another 20 degrees higher with these A-arms, I'm going to run into my frame. So flat on these A-arms is going to be about 90% of my travel. So I need to make sure when I do mount my shocks that we pull the spring off, we collapse them down, and mount our dead stop wherever we want it. That makes sense? Cool. Okay, so we're going to get to bending some tube. We're going to go with 25-degree bends. How I came up with that is you can go on JD2 JD2 sells like tubing benders and accessories, and you can put in the size of your die, and you can get these 180 rulers. They are extremely handy because it's going to tell you where to start your bend to end up with something, and you can do all the way to a 180. So I just set this at 20, checked it, 20 wasn't good enough, set it at 25, and bam, seems to be perfect. Is that cool? Is that real nice? All right, let's start this. We got our Narhesa bender all fired up and dialed in. We're doing 5 degrees of overbend for my tubing. It's going to be different for every tubing. So we're going to cut 2 18-inch pieces of this 11 gauge 1 1/4. We're going to clean it up. We now have air. We got our dryer from Harbor Freight. Thank you, Harbor Freight, for sending that puppy out. That's nice because all of our air is super dry. So let's get this started. Live fire. So the reason I'm eating all this scale off is, for one, to see my marks on the tube, but for two, it's a lot better on your tubing dies, no matter what kind of tubing bender you're using, to get all the scale off and any rust off your tubing. So I highly recommend getting these Benchmark abrasive purple pads. They last a very long time. You can use them on air. Just watch your RPMs. They can't go, what is it, above 20,000 RPMs, so don't have too much, you know, hog foot. And we used to use this Milwaukee one. But batteries, let's face it, battery sucks. Air's forever. We need it to live, you know. We don't need batteries to live, you know what I'm saying? God made it for a reason. .25 degrees of a bend. We gotta do one more, and then eventually we'll have to do several more because we're replicating this A-arm on the opposite side of the chassis. Tighten it down. Someone asked in a video a while back why I'm not using blaster on this. That's because I have 6 cans of this bend spray, so I use that before I waste my blaster. You don't have to put this Allen locking collar on it, but I find I get more consistent bends if I use it, so I keep one for every size tubing that I use. And the reason I'm having to do this, grind this out, is you can buy these bungs in all different sizes from QS Components, which I highly recommend using their Heim joints. We also have a discount code down below if you go to their website. If you use our Amazon links, there's no discount code, but we'll have both down there. So the reason we're having to do this is because these are made for DOM tube. That's seamless tube. This is seamed tube because we're just building go-karts. So that's the reason we're having to open it up. So what I've done is I went over there, slid this on the Heim joint once I got this fitted and stepped down. So I slid it on the Heim joint and I laid it over top of that stub that I made on the spindle Heim joint, and I just crudely drew a line. So then I took it on the bandsaw, cut the excess off. I always leave about 3/8 of an inch for the cope, and the cope would be the notch. And I'm going to do this since my notcher that I use won't do this high of an angle. Most tubing notchers won't. I can do it on our Dictator belt sander. This thing is awesome because you can quickly slide this piece out, and if you get the notching bar for it, you just slide this in. You pick what size tube you're going to do. We got small 1/2 inch, I think, all the way up to 1 1/2, so we're going to use the 1 1/4. I'm going to slide that in. Don't let it fall out. Slide your belt. Make sure you're always running your belt the proper way. It does have arrows on the inside. We're using Benchmark abrasive belts. That's what we do. Push it down, slide it all the way forward like that. Lock this thumb screw in, and when you let it go, super tight. We go ahead and spin it. To adjust it before turning it on. I'm going to coat this here. We can go testing it on the Buggy. No joke, that was first try. So, holla at your boy. Sometimes it don't work like that though. They went right inside that engine block. So we just have 4 more of those to do because now we have to replicate that 4 more times. Well, let's just make sure. So we know that's sitting where we want it. Oh, and that dictator belt sander, always make sure to keep a bucket at the bottom of it to dip your parts in because they do get pretty hot on there. I mean, you're eating steel with a sanding belt, for Pete's sakes. Yeah, that's right. So that's the same on both sides. So we got to make 3 more of these. We're not going to bore you with that. I'm going to clean this up with my grinder. Just get it all ready to go. When I TIG weld everything, I like TIG welding my personal A-arms. When we start selling kits, they're going to be MIG weld. Let's just face it, I ain't got time for that. You can pay a premium for TIG welded ones, but it's quite a bit more money. I mean, it takes, you can MIG weld A-arms in probably 4 or 5 minutes per set. Once you got a jig made, but TIG welding takes triple to 4 times that. So when we do start selling our kits, you can get everything TIG welded, or you can get it MIG welded. So I'll get these done. Then we can do our crossbar. I always put a little bend in it sometimes. Sometimes I just do it straight across. I know what I'm doing. And then this one is going to be just like this, but dual buoys coming into it. They'll have a bend somewhere. Most likely we're going to try to keep everything 25 degrees because that makes it simple. So I'll show you when we get the other bottom one made. So guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. My voice is really rough because we've all been sick. My wife got sick, then I got sick. But the next video, we're gonna do the steering. We're gonna mount the steering rack, the steering wheel, and the hoop and everything, and start finishing this thing up. We'll probably go ahead and do the pedals, and we need to finish the top of the roll cage. You need to put the eyebrow in, which is like the headache bar or whatever, and then do the top bars. So, and we did put sliders on this seat. I do think I'm gonna take them off because this cage should have been a little bit higher. So if I take the sliders off, I don't see anybody needing to really slide that seat because my knees are bent pretty good being in there. So
that'll lower the seat about an inch and give us that much more headroom. So let me know what you think about this style of A-arm. Now, I didn't do any kind of approach angle. I know in the past I've talked about me doing 15 degrees, and that's where you tilt your A-arms back 15 degrees. And what that does is if you come up to an obstacle in the woods, that's more for woods riding. But if you come up to a log or a stump or something and want to pop over it, it's very easy on the front end doing that with an approach angle, where your A-arms, if they're flat, they just want to go up and down. So if you slant them back, they're already naturally moving in the way that obstacle is going to push them. So it's easier on your tabs and stuff. I actually learned that from the Deuce Man and some old rail buggy guys I saw at the trail that had some old VW rail buggies that they did double A-arm front suspension. They all said that they wish they would have put approach angle on it to be easier on their tabs and their chassis. So this thing's coming along. We're going to get to this very soon because we have the SEMA build back. It stayed gone for a long time. Now we have it back. It's in a shed outside. We need to get it in and finish it up. We got to do like shifter, gas tank, oil tank, stuff like that, some cooling stuff for that engine, and get it done. So we need to get this one off the table so we can get that one in and finish it up. So we're going to be working on this as much as we can the next few weeks. We also got us a CNC plasma table from Avid CNC. We're super pumped about that because that's going to make builds go so much faster, because now we don't have to hand make every one of our spindles and just random brackets. It takes, like the tabs on this freaking thing took hours to make because we're having to hand do them all. So huge shout out to Avid CNC for sending that out. So make sure to check out Centurial Tools. They made this build possible. They basically funded it and sent out the engine. So massive shout out to them. Their tools are extremely helpful for people beginning to notch tube. Even veterans that's been notching tube, it can still speed you up. So I highly recommend checking them out. We use them when we're building out our chassis, and they're very handy, especially if you're working by yourself, a lot of their tools. So make sure to check out all the links to all the parts and tools that companies have sent to help make this possible and easier to build. So thank you guys so much for watching. We love you, and we'll see you on the next one. God bless.